What's going on, mi gente? We're just a couple of days away from the World Cup qualifier starting, and we're here to break down every single nation in the conmebol region, so stay tuned. Today, I got David from Warriors of Uruguay to talk about Uruguay right before the qualifiers, and let's talk about this upcoming campaign. David, how are you today? Thank you for being here.
Hi, man. It's a pleasure. Thank you. I'm okay. And yeah, really glad that the qualifiers are almost there. I just mentioned to you off air, it's a different feel to it because of the six spots, it's guaranteed spots, and then the playoff spot. But still, I mean, it's always good to see Uruguay for me and Peru for you play because that's what it's all about. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now that you mentioned those extra spots that conmebol have gotten, which are now 6.5 for those that don't know, does this for you make it easier for Uruguay now?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, even when the four spots that were there and the fifth for playoff, I think the last two campaigns, Uruguay shouldn't have made it that hard on themselves. Certainly in 2022, because Uruguay with the squad Uruguay has is certainly behind Brazil, Argentina, comfortably the third best and have the third best national pool in South America, in my opinion. So now with it being extended even more to the six spots, 6.5 spots, it's like I mean, no, I mean you have to do it still. Obviously, big things can happen. I mean, it's always tricky, but Uruguay have to be comfortable, and it has to be the emphasis should be more now on for Bielsa as the new manager to create something to make his squad to implement his style of play. And the qualifiers now present more of a not a calm way, but a more comfortable way of doing this than it normally would have. Because the only choice or the only time you have to normally implement this is in the friendlies where you can do it with no pressure. But how many friendlies do we play nowadays? Not a lot, you know. I mean, so yeah.
It's crazy that you mentioned how it got away from Uruguay in that last campaign in 2022, because if you look at the table, for anyone that doesn't watch the conmebol qualifiers, Uruguay finished in third, right? But there was those, yes, 8 wins, 4 draws, 6 losses. But those 4 draws and 6 losses came at a period where it was still vital and it was very close up in the air, right?
Yeah.
So now, I mean, they got it done at the end of the day. But there was a switch. There was a switch from El Maestro Tavares, and then Diego Alonso came in. How was that switch? And now with another switch, because now you guys got Marcelo Bielsa.
Yeah, I mean, looking back at it, the last 2 years has been really crazy because you have Tabares, and I mean, a lot of people have had criticism for Tabares for a long time, even when outsiders were probably thinking, "Oh, look at Tabares still there, what a king," and he is the king, for what he's done. But the criticism was there long way back with Tabares, and you can only look at the Copa Americas of the last 10 years after the 2011 win to to see what we're talking about. And Uruguay were just really pragmatic and really the coaching standards were not on the standards of the players. And certainly with the young players coming through, playing at their club, attacking football, high pressing, Uruguay were not at that level. And Uruguay were getting absolutely humiliated by Brazil, but not even by Brazil only, by Bolivia away. That was the final straw. And this is when Tavares went because normally Tavares has always had these kind of runs in the qualifiers. It's never an easy road. It's always these 4 or 5 games where we screw up. Even it happened in 2011 or 2018. I mean, when Uruguay eventually also finished this qualified second as Brazil or sorry, as Argentina were really back into the pack when they struggled. But even then, Uruguay had a run of 5 games where they lost 5 games, and this happened in the 2022 run as well. But the problem was that there seemed to be no upturn, there seemed to be no change, and then the AOF had to really do what it did, and which was a tough decision, but it was the right decision at that moment. And then Diego Alonso came in, and Diego Alonso came in as someone who did well in Mexico, but someone who didn't convince in the MLS. Okay, maybe have me 2 seasons for a new club, Inter Miami. Back then, I mean, not as it's a really different story now, obviously with Messi coming in. And he came in with his high pressing style, trying to play on the front foot, and he got the results. And not against the best opponents. I mean, we played Peru. Peru was a big competitor for us, but it was no Argentina and Brazil. So the jury was still out there if he could do it. And then the World Cup came, and he just showed that he was not up to it. He basically he bottled it in his team selection, in his way of approaching games. And Uruguay came to the World Cup being scared to play football, being scared of South Korea, of Portugal, and then in the Ghana game, you go for it and you go out because of a goal difference. But that's of your own making. So to really finalize it, then we were knocked out of the in the group stages for the first time since 2002, and for many of us it was like you cannot continue after having a campaign like this, even if you did well in the qualifiers, even if maybe there's still hope you can turn it around, but there's some things just are not acceptable as a Uruguay manager, especially with such a tradition on the world stage. But AOF really kind of flirted with staying with Alonso still, and maybe that keeping him on, and it just this saga kept on and kept on, and eventually, finally, the Bielsa name came up. For me, my preference was always Guillermo Almada, who's a brilliant manager at Santos or at Pachuca right now. But Bielsa came, and Bielsa obviously brings a lot of promise with the way he has his teams playing football. But I'm also not completely sold. So yeah, we will have to find out.
Okay, interesting, because you say, okay, you're not completely sold on Bielsa, which is fair, right? We all know he's nicknamed the Loco Bielsa for a reason.
Yeah.
There's the style of play obviously can be very appeasing, very appealing to the public eye because of his attacking style and pressuring up the front. I think to me the biggest change or the thing that I want to see the most is how Bielsa works with the up and coming youngsters that Uruguay has, because as we all know, Uruguay's, their golden era, their golden generation with Luis Suarez, Cavani, Godin, all of them are only aging, and some of them are not even returning, according to Marcelo Bielsa, right? So what are the expectations there?
That's a good point. I mean, that's one what has been going on for a long time. I mean, I would even say from like 2016, 2017, with a new generation coming through and this recambio, which has to take place. And it's still not happened completely. I mean, obviously, the likes of Valverde has really consolidated himself in the team, but like there's still the breakthrough and the big shift is still not completely there. You could even see that at the World Cup, when Godin and Suarez and Cavani were still figuring largely. So that's the interesting thing, and I think Bielsa will do well in this regard. I mean, Godin has retired, so we don't even have to talk about that. But there are big rumors, and the problem is sometimes you don't know what to believe in South American media, and certainly in Uruguay media in the last 2 years, because since Tavares went away, like the links between journalists and the AOF and the net coaching staff it's been bad. There's been like one truth for 10 lies, basically. So we don't know what it says, but reportedly Suarez and Cavani are not being called up to the squad that should be announced today. So that would mean a big shift in attack, first of all. But that's what he needs this, because if he wants to implement his style of play, which is high pressing, all action. You cannot use Suarez for this. Cavani you can, but after half an hour you have to stop him off because he's gonna get injured. That's the reality of it. So that's interesting and very fascinating to see. And I think we will find out in the upcoming qualifiers already, because I think there will be quite a young squad. Yeah.
Now, realistically speaking, let's say we're in 2026 now, or right before the 2026 World Cup. Where do you see Uruguay finishing in this conmebol standings?
I think the least Uruguay should finish, and maybe that's a bit arrogant to say, but I think the least Uruguay should finish is third, because that's the thing. What I've been hugely frustrated about is that Uruguay, as they have been doing for the last 10 years, basically, should not be in the pack with Ecuador, Peru, Paraguay, all respective nations, which are great footballing nations, but should not be in the pack with these. No, we should be in the pack with Brazil and Argentina, chancing for those two, because that's what Uruguay has been all about historically anyway. But even beyond that, Uruguay have had generations where we're not up to the standards. But that's not the case for the last 10 years. It hasn't been the case, and it's not going to be the case for the upcoming 10 years. Sure, Brazil Argentina, I mean, Uruguay don't have Neymar, for example, and Uruguay don't have the depth of talent that Argentina and Brazil has, although the depth of talent has been improving a lot if you compare it to a few generations ago. But having said that, Uruguay do have a squad which in a one game occasion, or even in a tournament, can challenge and can go up against anybody and come out as the winning team. That's what I firmly believe. So yeah, to answer your question, Uruguay should aim to be in the top three and hopefully finally get a win over Brazil or Argentina, because that's been like 10, 15 years ago. It's unbelievable, man.
All right. So now that you got Uruguay in third, let's talk about the rest of the pack. Where do you see the standings? Because I'm interested in that only because of how now there's 6.5 spots. I'm interested to see where you see all the other teams kind of forming up the standings.
It's interesting. I mean, I think Ecuador is the big standout at the moment from the pack, to say, because the promise of Casero is the obvious one, but there are more. I mean, I think I'm not sure. His last name is Paez, I think.
Nice.
16-year-old who has been called up to the national team for the upcoming qualifiers, and there's more. And that's like, I think Ecuador is what Venezuela wished to be a couple of years ago. Venezuela had this generation that won that were losing finalists or won the 27 World Cup. I'm not sure now, and they seem to be really promising, but they faded away completely. I mean, you can look Peñaranda, for example, they're a big talent. I'm not sure even where he's playing. So Ecuador really is what Venezuela wanted to be, and Ecuador seems to be the real deal. So I think Ecuador will be up there, obviously. I mean, Colombia, I think the last 8 years it's been puzzling, you know. Sometimes they're there and sometimes they're they can't seem to score a goal the last qualifiers. I mean, they went goalless for a lot of games. And then obviously your guys, yeah, I mean, your guys, Peru. I think Peru will feel a bit more comfortable now. Obviously, it will be challenging, but Peru has always been in this like this playoff spot. It's been like you have never had a calm last 2 games of a qualifying campaign. Never. I mean, you always have to fight for it. And Uruguay had this for a lot of time as well. So I think Peru should, I mean, I mentioned Uruguay should aim for the third. I think Peru should be aiming to be in the top five. And I think they have a legitimate claim to be in this top five. So yeah.
So now, okay, let's say, so we have 7 spots up for grabs that can potentially make it, right? 6 will make it, and then that 7th spot will go to the playoff. Who are the 3 teams that you think won't make it?
Won't make it. Okay.
Yeah, won't.
So, well, I mean, Bolivia, I think, I mean, although last qualifying campaign, they came close in the end, you know, they did really well. So maybe I'm going too early on that, but that's the obvious one, obviously. Then I think Venezuela as well, because Venezuela seem to have no momentum as well at the moment, you know, with players, for example. So that's the thing. What is helping a nation a lot to have promise is a player doing well for their club at the first, and maybe they can do something for the national team and like impact some kind of a upcoming generation to come up, whatever. These things happen. So I think these two I would rule out, and then I would lean to Paraguay. Yeah. But it's hard because Paraguay also have these runs, have these qualifying campaigns sometimes where they are so tough, and they can really surprise, not because of the beauty of the way they play football, but because they're just true South American club side. Then they feel like a club side that's fighting hard in the Libertadores to come far. So who knows, man? I mean, what do you think? Who are your 3 teams where you say I think you're quite similar, right? Oh, yeah.
I think I'm quite similar so far, and we'll look back at this right before the World Cup, and we'll, you know, obviously everyone will come and talk bad about us or good, who knows? But I think as of right now, I can agree with Bolivia and Venezuela, those 2 being more of the obvious choices, because I think Bolivia just don't know how to get it done away from home. Right. And then even at home, there are some teams that have learned to handle that. Right. Argentina got their first win in the last campaign. Now, Venezuela, as you said, when Peckerman was announced as the coach, I said, you know what, maybe they're going to build on something. But now he's no longer the coach. So there's a process there that they're not willing to fulfill, I feel like, in the federation. And that is the biggest problem with them, with Lavinotinoto. That 3rd spot, man, is, to me, it's between Paraguay, Peru, Chile, to
I
be
mean,
honest with you.
I hope Chile will drop out, and you will obviously as well.
Yeah,
I mean, that's what I hope.
yeah,
And I also see this as a possibility because we mentioned before with these young players coming through. I don't see a lot with Chile, and that's been for a couple of years there. They had that golden generation, which I mean, I'm sorry to say, they did miss out on the last two World Cups. So, but it's not there's not a multitude of players coming through, and maybe they will be coming through. I mean, I'm not covering everything, or I mean, I don't have eyes everywhere, so
right.
there might be players there that I'm completely looking past, and I'm sorry for if that's the case. But on like the surface, you know, and I do like to dig deep, even when it comes to South American football. But on the surface, doesn't seem to me that there's like a new team standing up, which maybe can play alongside Alexis and Fidal, who are really getting on, who should, I mean, they are on the same age of Suarez and Cavani and Godin, but they are still carrying on. That's like really, that's kind of proves what I'm trying to say, because they have to stay there, because there's not a lot coming through still.
Yeah. They
So,
don't have
yeah,
a change yet. And this is
no,
exactly why for me it was important to kind of do these previews so that everyone kind of learns more about each nation with the CONMEBOL qualifiers and see what they're working with. David, I want to thank you for your time, for your insight into La Celeste. I want to give you this last minute for you to kind of tell the people where they can find you, your work, and they can follow you.
okay, man, I appreciate that, and I'm looking forward to the obviously also the other people coming on for the representing Chile and Bolivia, for example, because then we can get to know what they're about and get a really detailed analysis from in what situation they are. So you can find me on Twitter. It's Uruguayan Heroes, Warriors of Uruguay. Yeah, just basically talking about Uruguayans around the world, mainly focusing on the national team associated players and young players coming through. So not so much on the domestic league. But yeah, I'm trying to cover it there and just have a good time. I mean, Twitter is a crazy place, but you do have a fun time there. So yeah, you can find me on there. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you again, David. And thank you guys for tuning in. This is all on La Celeste. We'll have the rest of the CONMEBOL Nation. So don't forget to comment, like, subscribe, and we'll see you next time.